Ondo Finance founder and CEO, Nathan Allman. Nathan, congratulations on this event.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really exciting to see everyone in the room together, and all the Ondo branding everywhere. We just unveiled our new brand a few days ago, so it's great to see it in the live.
It's interesting. The choice of venue is perfect because it's it's jazz, which when jazz was brought to Lincoln Center, it was kind of a new thing, right? Columbus Circle, when it was renewed, kind of felt like a new thing. Yet, you could confuse the crowd here with their attire and their demeanor for somebody seeing kind of a piece of serious music. So it feels like a very serious event, and I think your announcement this morning really opens a new chapter for how serious money moves around on blockchains. So maybe we want to start by just recapping what the gist of the announcement is about the blockchain and about what you're going to bring to finance.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few days ago, we announced GlobalMarkets, which is our platform to tokenize exposure to U.S. public securities for a non-U.S. audience. And it's really our first large-scale foray into tokenization. We have a couple of single products right now, tokenized treasuries. But as we went down the rabbit hole of how do we really scale this up to thousands of securities and to working with distribution partners, both in TradFi and in crypto, we found a lot of infrastructure challenges, really both with conventional public blockchains and with permission chains. With respect to conventional public blockchains, there's a ton of fragmentation across tons and tons of L1s and L2s, and issuing tokenized real-world assets across all of these different chains and keeping liquidity connected is enormously risky, difficult, expensive. These are pain points we felt even on a small scale of doing that with our two tokenized treasuries products, USDY being on 8 or 9 chains right now. And so that fragmentation is one of the things we're trying to address with Ondo Chain, which we're calling the omni-chain network for real-world assets. And it's really meant to be a hub for the initial issuance of tokenized real-world assets that we can then distribute and bridge to the broader public and permission blockchain ecosystems.
Tell us a little bit more about how it addresses that fragmentation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a number of things we're doing under the hood, but one example is that validators in Ondo Chain will actually be running a cross-chain bridge themselves. Specifically, we've partnered with Layer 0, and they'll be running DVNs to connect to different chains while having redundancy so that you're not reliant on any single bridge or other technical provider. And then with respect to connectivity to TradFi and addressing some of the fragmentation there, a number of the validators will be permissioned financial institutions, including broker-dealers, who can do things like purchase a security on a traditional stock exchange or other traditional liquidity source, and then mint a token with very, very low latency because they're actually involved in validation of the network.
So that's interesting, right? You're talking about interoperability. You're talking about lowering fees, but this permission part is important because you're recognizing that the needs of minting for an institution, which really has to make sure it gets all its ducks in a row, right, before is going to be different from minting a meme coin, right? And rather than using a public blockchain and having it adapt and not quite getting there, you're saying this is purpose-built for that, so that collateral can be observed, so that only known or specific parties can participate, and so that there's a different layer of amount of trust that'll come out of the products that are minted. Is that kind of where we're going? It's not total decentralization, but it's something right meeting in the middle of the bridge.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it's important to really emphasize that this is a hybrid approach, right? It's not, a conventional public chain or permission chain. There's permission validators, but access is generally speaking open, right? Anyone can have a wallet, anyone can deploy code, and so on. It's been interesting to observe. We've seen so much work at these extremes, of the banks working on their totally permissioned walled gardens. Only the banks can even see what's on the chain, right? I mean, in some respects, it might as well not be a blockchain. And then you have all these public chains that are so focused on censorship resistance and, extreme decentralization to varying degrees for sure. But when you're already dealing with real world assets, you just don't need the true trustlessness to the same degree that most public blockchains are focused on. So we really like this hybrid approach. I mean, I think commercially, you don't give up much by permissioning validators. A lot of public blockchains, while they're not open about it, they already have de facto permission validators, especially in their early to medium stages of their decentralization journey.
Yeah.
So I think what people care about is open access to deploy code, to have a wallet, to hold an asset, to view the chain, and we're generally speaking enabling all of that on Ondo Chain.
There is an interesting piece here that I want to talk about, and that's the staking of real-world assets. Talk to us a little bit about how Ondo is enabling that and what the compliance and regulatory side of that looks like.
For sure. Yeah, this is something we're really excited about. I mean, honestly, this was the first feature that we conceived of when we were, thinking about the design of our own chain. It really stemmed from an observation of the incredibly high security costs that every new layer 1 blockchain pays to bootstrap their own network, right? I mean, and this is in the form of inflationary token rewards, often in the hundreds of millions, per year that these chains pay to bootstrap security. And again, when you're in this framework of already needing to trust and rely on custodians and other, regulated financial institutions to back real world assets, there's no need for a new disconnected digitally native asset to secure the chain. And so we can use things like tokenized treasuries as staking collateral, which you really might analogize in traditional finance to just simple collateral, like many financial institutions post at a lot of financial utilities, like clearinghouses, for instance, that ensures their good behavior generally. It's a loose analogy, but you're trusting them, but they're posting collateral that you can seize, so it's not like an unsecured recourse.
A lot of people in digital assets, especially the early crusaders, had, let's call it, a complicated relationship with banks and traditional financial institutions. I think it's important they understand how critical this framework is, right, to improving things for everybody, including themselves ultimately. What's a great way to sort of chunk that into intuition so that folks who are, I think, really are maxi decentralized people and maxi public blockchain people, how can they conceive of the utility of this hybrid approach and how it will benefit them ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, folks in the crypto ecosystem have a lot of different goals, right? And I think that, for Bitcoin, for instance, the thesis of truly censorship resistant store of value does hinge on true trustlessness and not relying on or even needing cooperation from banks, et cetera. I think even in that case, things like the Bitcoin ETFs and regulated custodian custody of Bitcoin, which hopefully we'll see more of post SAB 121 being repealed, are still good for that mission, but are less critical than, of course, what we're doing in our space, which is really all about expanding global access to initially U.S. publicly traded securities that are hard to reach in a variety of emerging markets for many people.
Really quickly before we wrap up here, what kind of demand is there for what you're building? How did you assess that?
We really assessed it from distribution partners. We're primarily B2B2C focused in global markets, and that's both with crypto native platforms, wallets, protocols, exchanges, where we've seen a lot of demand. I mean, we've spoken with tons of these companies, and they're very, very interested, and they know their users are interested in securities exposure, but in many cases, they haven't known how to deliver that historically. And there's some special use cases there, like things like cross-collateralization between both crypto and securities, which you really can't do anywhere right now. And then I'd say the less obvious demand is from the more traditional distribution partners like fintech broker-dealers outside the US who have really high costs and friction in operating their business today. You hear Vlad, the Robinhood CEO, talk about how running their crypto business is 10 times cheaper than the traditional business. Like, some of that is because of regulatory and compliance differences, but a lot of it is just because of the infrastructure. So yeah, we're also really excited to work with those more traditional players on distribution.